I'm Tiffany Blackmon, and this is my so-called fabulous. Welcome to the show, y'all. I have her back again, Tracy Walder, the unexpected spy, the author of this fabulous book. And let me tell you, this woman was on the show. Gosh, it was back episode 118, season 3. I had her earlier in the season talking about school safety. But let me give you a little bit. I want you to go back to 118, of course, number 161 this season. But this woman is a former CIA officer. She served 9 tours, y'all. 9, 2 in Afghanistan. The rest, she won't tell me where it is. It was undercover. Yeah, how cool is that? FBI special agent working in Chinese counterintelligence, recruited the CIA her junior year at USC, living in the DG house, that sorority house. Oh, my goodness. She went to a job fair, and I think she was wanting to be a history teacher, maybe, and interviewed with CIA, got the job, and she has been trailblazing ever since. She then went to the FBI and then a history teacher. She is teaching at my alma mater, TCU now. Welcome to the show, back to the show, Tracy Walder.
Thank you so much for having me, Tiffany. Congrats on the success of your podcast. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time, because I know you're traveling over here and you're seeing me, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate you supporting me and my so-called fabulous.
Of course. I love this podcast. I love Fort Worth, too.
Well, thank you. And some days it's not so fabulous, but today it is. You're here. So we are going to talk about, because so many have asked me to talk about true crime, and I have to say I'm not a candidate to talk about it at all. So my daughter just said, Mom, get Tracy back. So I did, and we are talking about true crime, talking about crime, and it's obviously a thing. You're very passionate about it. You are working for whom now?
So now I do national security and crime contributions to News Nation and then to Law and Crime Network. So it's something I do all the time. And then obviously I teach criminal justice.
That's right.
At TCU.
Exactly. So you're teaching this. Tracy, what is not everyone, not me, but what is people fascination with true crime podcasts, streaming, documentaries, books? Tell me.
Yeah. So, I try to get away like my teacher hat. The term we use in criminal justice is the wedding cake model of crime. And the reality is the serial killings, all of the deviant stuff that people seem to really be fascinated by is just the top tier of the wedding cake. It's not as much crime as we suspect, right? That bottom tier, the largest tier of the wedding cake, those are misdemeanors, that, parking tickets, those kinds of things. And that's really what is happening most of the time. However, the media coverage, right, that we get with these, serial killer cases or murder cases would make it seem like that's what's happening more, but it's really not. And so I think a lot of times we're just obsessed with this deviant behavior because it's not something we can wrap our own brains around. And so it's our way of trying to understand, how this happened and how to not be a victim of this.
Exactly. And I was reading, and I'm going to paraphrase what I read this morning in the wee hours, doing some research on why. My daughter loves true crime. And I told you before, she wanted us to put a chip in her. She was worried about being kidnapped. She was worried about me and her dad. And that was in her younger years, 24 now. And I'm like, Kennedy, why are you watching this? And she's like, Mother, it makes me alert. It makes me aware, and you should listen to it. But Tracy, the last movie I saw that was scary is Copycat. I was so scared I didn't even want to go out of it. With Robert Downey Jr. a long time ago. I didn't even want to leave the house. It casts a spell on me. So what am I doing here? What should I be doing? I mean, do what you want. You do you. But people are different. But the fascination is there, but also are they trying not to get?
Yes and no. You have to remember the true crime that we see on TV or Netflix or, any of those, which is all true. It all really happened. But that's what's going to sell, right? So we have to remember that that's not the norm, and that's not what's happening every single day, multiple times a day. And so, yes, it does create this sense of fear sometimes in folks that this is something that must be happening all the time. And that is problematic. But I think what your daughter is doing in a way of being proactive is really great, quite frankly, in that she's trying to learn what to do and what not to do based on what has happened to these victims.
I shared with you and I've shared with my listeners, I'm very transparent. I had a first marriage that went awry. He went to jail for murder. It was a horrific murder. And I think that I have a lot of PTSD from that. And I think that I'm afraid, but you would think that I would never want to attract that person again. This was a long time ago, long time ago. So I think that if I would be looking for that clue that maybe that was like him. You know what I mean? Maybe that's my backwards thinking. I don't know. But anyway, it's like I said, I told you I'm not an expert in this, but I'm just curious, why? Because a lot of people I told you were coming on and they're like, Tiffany, that's great. Oh my gosh, ask her these questions. Well, thanks, because I need all the questions I can get. So talk to us about serial killers. Talk to us about the brain of a serial killer.
Well, so the serial killer really boils down to psychopaths versus sociopaths, right? And so a lot of times, with serial killers, they seem, and I think this might be, I don't want to say attraction, that's the wrong word, but the fact that people become so captivated by this is they seem so much like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we want them to look like the boogeyman, if that makes any sense. We want them to look different than us, to think different than us. But sometimes the reality is that, they don't. And so really the difference, though, becomes serial killer versus, mass murder. And typically a mass murder is multiple people being killed all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Serial killer is killing multiple people, but at different times in different locations. So that's really the difference. But, if we look at the Idaho, Brian Kohberger, right now, that really just looks like a mass killing if we think about it, because it's 4 people all in the same location. Mm-hmm. Now, if we start to see him being tied, right, to other killings at other locations, then that becomes a serial killer situation. So I don't want to say confusing the two. I'm just not sure we know the difference really between the two.
Right. And serial killers, I was listening to a lot of your TikToks. I listen to all your TikToks, but the serial killers, do they leave clues?
It depends. So that's another one where sometimes I'll get frustrated because becoming obsessive about them leaving clues sometimes makes it so that we don't solve the crime. Because what can happen is we find, a victim and there was no smiley face there. Therefore, it can't be the same killer. Well, it can be, because maybe the smiley face wasn't on purpose. Right. So we don't know. Some leave clues, some don't. They actually more don't than do, quite frankly. But we see that being played up a lot of times in the movies.
I mean, I would assume they don't want to get caught because it is an addiction to killing, right?
It's more an addiction to control and dominance. I think that's more the situation.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So the serial killers, okay, so you were talking about the murders, or it is not the murder. We think it's natural reasons that these men have been drowning in these lakes, in Lady Bird Lake in Austin, in Chicago, in La Crosse, Wisconsin, in Boston, Massachusetts. So explain that to me, because I've heard that it was down on Rainey Street, and Greg and I used to live on Rainey Street in Austin, and right after we moved is when this started happening.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So this has been going on for a while, since about 2008-ish, where they've been finding clusters, right? That's where we start. Look, the reality is, and I hate to be flippant, I don't mean to be, but when you have large bodies of water near very inhabited areas, you are unfortunately going to have accidental drownings. That's just something that happens. But when you have clusters of 5, 6, 7 people all being killed within the same week or within, just a few days, that is something that we need to start looking at. But that is one of the issues where I think we got too caught up with looking for that clue that they leave behind. And it started with being identified as a smiley face killer, and that they saw smiley face graffiti in New York where some of these bodies ended up. But the thing is the graffiti was over half a mile away, and it's graffiti. And so really it could be anything. And because if we look at, Austin or Chicago, there's no graffiti near these bodies, I'm wondering if people just aren't making that connection, that maybe some of this all might be connected because they've become so focused on this smiley face issue. Also, we don't have cause of death released for a lot of these individuals, which is concerning.
Yes.
I would think at this point, some of them have been ruled accidental drownings. Some of them still haven't been, but they suspect accidental drownings. And so those kinds of things are concerning to me, especially when I started to look at Chicago and Austin. So Chicago started with just a slew of 8 to 10 bodies, and then it stopped. And about a month later, it started in Austin, and nothing was happening in Chicago. And now nothing's really happening in Austin, and more bodies are being found in Chicago. And I find that to be very interesting. Is that the same person? Is it not? I don't know. But I just find the whole thing to be interesting.
Tracy, could it be could these killings or possible killings, I guess that's what I'm supposed to say, alleged, could they be from a group?
We've never seen that before.
Really?
But, who's to say it's never happened and we just don't know about it? Yes, it could be. It very much could be a group of, serial killers, 4 or 5 people, could be one person. But yes, I think the possibility is always there. Just because we've never seen it doesn't mean it isn't sadly possible.
And the demographics.
Mm-hmm.
What are the demographics?
So between the ages of about 20 to 35 males. We've seen different ethnicities, different races, but almost all except one have been males.
Oh my gosh. It's amazing to me. And again, clues. Is it really a clue or is it just a happenstance,
Exactly.
right? That would just drive me crazy. So who is investigating this? Is it local or FBI?
Local.
It's local.
It's local.
Okay. When does the FBI step in?
The FBI wouldn't come in. That would be crossing their jurisdictional lines unless they're asked to come in, like they were in Idaho. No, it is, if we haven't made a connection, between the two, that these are crossing state lines, then it's really up to Chicago police and Austin police to be investigating these, which they are.
So, as a former FBI agent, does that grind your gears that they couldn't know?
Because I think a big misconception about the FBI is that they investigate murders.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually not a lot of what we do, because most murders are not federal crimes. They're not crossing state lines.
Okay.
Right? It's a whole lot of white collar, a whole lot of financial fraud and those kinds of things. It's not to say it's never happened, but really the FBI is invited in on those kinds of cases. And I'm fine with that. It's Austin PD's job to investigate crimes that happen in Austin.
Right. Okay, let's go to Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Kohlberger. He has been indicted.
Yes.
For the 4 murders.
Yes.
Of the Idaho students. Why? That's a silly question, but and he's an intelligent man.
Well, that's the issue, right? Is the why. That's what everyone wants to know. That's why we become so interested in things like this, and this deviant behavior is the why. Because if we can make sense of the why, then we can become not a victim, because we understand the why. And so I think that's the issue in this particular case. And yeah, he's working on his PhD in criminal justice, which, is obviously interesting. Most serial killers have high IQ, so that's not strange, necessarily, if we look at that. But yeah, I have my theories as to why he did what he did, but obviously it's just a theory.
So I have not researched this, so I'm just going off. You and I are just sitting here having conversation. Did he know these students?
So, well, that's the question, right? And unfortunately, the indictment is for the most part sealed. So the probable cause affidavit, which is the document that the FBI or, Idaho PD used to get that indictment. So it's all the things that they think, led them to believe that Kohlberger is guilty of this crime is sealed. So I can't know.
Right.
But based on information that's come out, I personally think that he had become infatuated, maybe through a chance encounter, maybe, on the street, at a restaurant, whatever, with one of the girls in the house. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say who it is, but it's just because out of respect to the family.
Sure.
That's not right. And I think he became obsessed with her. I don't think he planned on killing 4 people that night. I really don't. I don't think he expected one of them to be there because she actually wasn't supposed to be there.
Ugh.
And so I really do think that that is where that started. And I think once things are unsealed, we'll see that maybe he had tried to contact one of them on social media.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. I mean, I think about this and I think about the families, just like you said, and just horrific any way you look at it. But what are people thinking? I think of this too of financial crime or white collar crime. You're going to get caught, right?
I mean, Tiffany, that's how I feel, especially in this day and age with technology and digital. Like, I really don't know what people are thinking except for greed. My students at TCU last week, we just did Bernie Madoff and financial crime.
Oh,
and they were just like, how did he not think that this would implode? And they're not wrong, right? Like,
they're not wrong.
But I think we get motivated by greed and we think we can keep covering up. And I think ego gets involved and you start to think you're smarter and better. And that's how that.
You know, the Madoff, I just recently watched that. I did watch that
documentary.
But, I mean, the documentary, but I would, again, going, how in the world did you not think? Now, back then, it's all written and everything. Okay, maybe, but he was getting caught.
Doing this in 2008.
For sure.
So, you know.
I mean, so I'm just amazed.
It's going to take a long time for the FBI to catch you. Financial crimes take a long time to process because it is quite the web, right, of just documents and wires and money going back and forth. And that takes a long time to, unravel.
Right.
But you're going to get caught at some point.
You even said in an interview, I saw you on an interview about the Idaho murders, or someone said, DNA, the blood is on the phone, or how do you clean up all the,
well, that was what the Idaho case, and I think interestingly, that's where their case might be the weakest. I can't decide. It's just my observation of that case, and I don't mean to be graphic, but in a scene that bloody, where you've killed 4 people with a knife, right? There was no DNA found in his car, no DNA found on him. That's weird, right? Just because DNA is so small, blood is so small that it's mystifying to me. I still think, even though he's been indicted, it's my opinion that he probably did it. Just my opinion.
Sure.
But again, it is going to be interesting for the prosecution to explain how there was no blood found, and they've taken apart his car and didn't find blood. And I thought for sure there would be blood in that car, and there was none.
Because that creates reasonable doubt.
Yes.
I'm acting like I know what I'm talking about.
It does create reasonable doubt, right? And that's
serious.
When I was an FBI agent, you would think that we want to think like the prosecution, right? Like gather evidence. And we do, but we also want to think about the defense. How are they going to poke holes in that evidence, right? So you have to think about it kind of both ways.
Could you ever be an attorney?
No.
I hear you. No, you're good. I know you're good. You don't need another resume.
Well, I mean, now, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this, but you've got the Murdaugh murders.
Yes. Yes, we are.
That's looking at being overthrown out, perhaps, because of misconduct.
What?
So the clerk of the court, obviously, Alex Murdaugh, he was convicted, so we can say he was found guilty of those murders, is not alleged. But now it's come forward that the clerk of the court, who's really the person in charge of, hurting the jury and all those kinds of things, told the jury essentially to find him guilty, and that, don't you think he's guilty, and that she struck a book deal as a result of this. So if that's true, this is not good.
Could the case really be thrown out?
I think he would get a new trial as a result of it.
My goodness. I mean, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine any level of all of these things. I mean, the people prosecuting, the defending, the people do it.
Yes.
I know. Okay. I'm going to take you, because Tracy and I have a guilty pleasure. We do, both of us. We both love The Housewives and Vanderpump Rules.
Yes.
It is my guilty pleasure because, I like the fashion with Beverly Hills, but it is mindless for me.
100%.
So mindless, and it just kind of calms me down.
100%.
I don't listen to true crime, don't watch it, but I
tell
the
my
drama.
husband that it's my pacifier.
Yes. So let's go to Scandival.
Yes.
Tom Sandoval. Yes. Okay. If you're not familiar, Vanderpump Rules on Bravo and Tom Sandoval. my question is, how do you spot a liar? That guy is good, right?
Yes, and I did a TikTok, I think, and it's interesting. I could probably do a whole true crime of the housewives, quite frankly, because so many of them have been indicted,
Yes.
and found guilty, quite frankly. I mean, one's in jail right now that we know,
Yes.
of these crimes, and so really, there's so much we could do with that.
Mhm.
But with
Will you come back and let's do that?
yes, of
Oh
course,
my
that'd be
gosh.
fabulous.
I just thought about 4 of them. Yes. Sorry to
I mean,
interrupt you.
there's so many.
Yes.
That's the thing. So, a couple ways to spot a liar. The first one is they never give you a straight answer to any question ever. I think that would be the number one way to spot a liar. I think the other one, and I'm talking more relationship wise,
Mhm.
is love bombing incessantly, love bombing to the extreme. So we're talking over the top signs of affection because in a way, perhaps they're compensating because they feel guilty
Yes.
about something. Yes. I think finally the third one is, never having their story straight and constantly deviating from what their original story was. So I would say those would sort of be the
So, yeah, that would be
things.
the markers.
Yes.
So, when you're if a liar, I always think that they just don't look at you, but there's good ones. There's good liars.
There's good liars that
They
look
can
at you.
look it right in.
Yeah, there's studies on eye contact and those kinds of things, and all of that does play a role. But I mean, I feel that Sandoval in this case was trying to come across as genuine. And as a result, I don't think he was really deviating in his eye contact, at least from what I saw.
No, he's good.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I mean, it's if I'm sure most of you watched. Obviously, they just reinvented themselves with
Yes.
Sandoval for sure, for sure, and Ariana. Okay, so let's take it a little more serious and let's talk about school shootings.
Sure.
All right, it's a thing. Church shootings, school shootings, even grocery stores. I
Mhm.
mean, they're just this is where we are in our society.
Mhm.
I have to say, probably will not go back to a movie theater because it's too easy to just watch it in the house. Besides, I'm watching The Housewives, but it's just, I'm nervous about that. But I've had people ask me, well, you go to the grocery store, you go to Central Market. So, what is that? What is the demographic for a school shooter or a church, any of them?
Well, so that's mostly how I feel actually about malls, shopping malls. I feel
Yes.
that way. I am very hesitant to go
Indoor,
to
indoor.
an indoor
Yeah.
mall. I really don't go,
No.
quite frankly, to indoor malls. I personally just don't feel comfortable. But the reality is everything's a target, right? It's what we call soft targets, the places where they're not hardened. And so I think that is mostly the demographic. What we're seeing in this mass shootings are males between the ages of 18 to about 22. So young males.
Can I ask why?
It was very interesting, and there was an article that I think the New York Times did. Was it 5 or 6 years ago? And it was called "Our Boys Are Not Okay," and it was all about a culture of toughness of raising boys. And I thought that was a really interesting. It shed a little bit of light on some of the mindset, but it's hard to say, for certain why without making, assumptions. I don't want to assume.
Exactly. And we don't want to assume. But, you and I both have our personal beliefs on the whole entire situation. And I think we need more control in this country, and we'll just leave it at that. And we have to be better than this. I mean, for people to be scared. You are a Jewish American. I mean, I asked you a year or so ago, you were like, that's the biggest target for you, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. No one seems to take issue with, CIA, FBI, which I completely thought people would. The biggest issue people don't like about me and send me the most hate about is my religion, which is crazy because I'm actually not that religious, quite frankly, either. I mean, yes, I'm Jewish, I'll always be Jewish, I'm not converting, but I'm just not a super religious person. But we have to have, I think it goes back to the school shootings too. I don't shy away from those conversations with my daughter. I found out that at one school she was at, they were just calling lockdown drills a game. We need to not be calling them that, no matter how little they are. It needs to be age appropriate for what they are. But I think we're having these lockdown drills. They need to be taken seriously, and we need to explain why we're having them, in these age appropriate ways. And she knows too. We got her we were in France, beautiful Star of David. It's like diamonds and pearls, and I don't let her wear it to school. because I just don't know. And that's really sad. And I have told her why, and she knows why. But it's just, unfortunately.
It's unfortunate.
Yes.
It is, but it is what it is. I mean, we are always thinking, I mean, I'm always looking, making sure that, but how do you know? You just don't know.
No.
You don't at all. I know. Stalkers. Are there stalker laws? Because you have a stalker.
Yeah. So no.
There's not.
There are, but it's very interesting. So yes, I have a stalker. Yay.
I cannot. I mean,
is fat, and he's a very famous, like, prolific stalker too. He's been in jail for stalking Ivanka Trump, Gwyneth Paltrow. Yeah, he's prolific. The interesting thing that I found is actually being on the other side of law enforcement now, and how we're not taken seriously sometimes, which is fascinating. So that's been really tough on me. We do have stalker laws, but the issue is typically they don't come with a stiff enough sentence. With my stalker, technically what he's doing is federal. He's crossing state lines doing this, right? He's in California, sometimes Florida. I'm here in Texas. And so he should be brought up on federal charges, which would have a much longer, stiffer sentence. But it's not viewed as an imminent threat. Therefore, my only option is to have him brought to Texas on probably misdemeanor harassment charges. He serves like 6 days, right, in jail. And now I've brought him to Texas.
You've pissed him off.
Correct.
Yeah.
And he's in my state, in my city. I don't really want that. And so, unfortunately, because of the law, I've made a choice not to do anything.
Right. And how is he stalking you?
Oh, so many ways. He calls my husband's work incessantly. He emails me, thousands of emails a day.
Thousands.
I don't know how he got my phone number, but then started leaving me so many messages that people then couldn't leave messages because my voicemail was full. I blocked him and couldn't understand why they were going into my blocked mess. Like, why is he still being able to get through? And the service provider said, oh, you can just block him, but he can still leave a message. I had no idea that that was a thing. So I've done detective work on my own, and we have his IP address, and I just track him myself.
What a sicko.
Yes.
That is unbelievable. But that's his career, it sounds like.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. No wonder we're so nervous with our children, right?
Yes.
So let's go to, I want to ask this, and like I said, everyone, listen to the previous podcast with her. She's amazing. But I have to ask you, between the CIA and the FBI, I know you had a favorite, right? I think I know, but
yes.
You do, right?
I do.
What is that?
The CIA definitely was my favorite.
Really?
I think it probably suited my personality a little bit more.
What was the most difficult part of being in the CIA? I know you're training. I know you're so physically fit.
The training was fun. That's how I viewed the training. I'm trying to think of what the most difficult part. Obviously, I think for me, the most difficult part is as after, right? And that's I guess a new development since I was on before, is a lot of us suffer from PTSD and major issues as a result of our service, and so we're not considered veterans because we're not military. And so I'm fortunate, and I have a husband who has insurance, so I get my medicine. I'm very open about I have depression and PTSD from my time. I take medicine, I go to therapy, all of that, but it's all covered. So I'm just paying a copay.
Right.
But not everyone's in the same situation as me. And even in the military, if you leave, retire, whatever, and you're in good standing, you will get coverage for those things. It's not perfect, but you get it. CIA does not. And we were in situations that were really, really bad.
Of course. You were in 7 countries.
So I got angry one day. And I did something I never do because I'm usually very measured. On social media, I don't rant. But I rage tweeted Senator Cornyn, who is our senator here in Texas.
Yes.
And I rage tweeted him because he sits on the Intelligence Committee. And just, this is ridiculous that the city just, rage tweet.
Sure.
He wrote me back.
He did?
Yes.
And
to his credit, he emailed me. His staff was emailing me. They had no idea,
of course,
that we were not covered, and really started taking an interest in it. And we're like horrified, basically, that we were not covered. as veterans. And so he worked with me for like over a year and a half to create legislation that created $10 million to be set aside for the CIA and former CIA officers for mental health care. And that just went into effect July 1st of this year.
Wow.
So thank you, Senator Cornyn.
Congratulations.
And who would have known that a rage tweet?
Well, there's a time and place for everything.
Yes, exactly.
I'm convinced,
Yes.
right? Well, good for you.
Mhm.
Because didn't you mention that if you see a mental health professional,
Yes.
a doctor, or if you're prescribed medication, which should be helping you, that affects your security
does.
clearance?
Yep.
Is that true?
So that's true. They are looking at revising that, because the way I see it is if you seek out a mental health professional, you are actually trying to be healthy. I think that's actually better than not seeking out a mental health professional. And so, yes, you do stand a risk of losing your security clearance. And at the FBI, you stand a risk of having your weapon taken away.
Right.
And a lot of people, as a result, then don't get treated for it, which I could understand because they
Right.
want to keep their jobs.
Well, of course,
Mhm.
want to keep quiet. I
Of
guess so. I mean, and that's the way of the world sometimes, unfortunately. Which brings me to FBI versus CIA. So obviously, y'all look at her. If you're on YouTube, she's just so beautiful and precious and has such a big heart. But you and I know you don't like this. You don't look like a CIA or you don't look
And I
like an
understand
FBI. I know you don't like that at all. But that's the cliche.
Yeah.
And when I say that, you told me when I met you, because I asked you about being in this population. You told me you were in the battlefields of Afghanistan with Navy SEALs,
Mhm.
young men, and you never felt harassed.
Nope.
You never felt
Never.
anything like that.
No.
When you're in an organization like the FBI, it can look different. Is that right?
Yes. And look, the CIA has its own problems. They're dealing with an actual sexual harassment lawsuit right now of an individual there. So I can only speak to my lived
Right.
experiences. However, I think that the gathering of intelligence and in law enforcement are viewed in two very different ways by our society. And you expect when someone's knocking down your door, right, to come and arrest you, that they're this big, strong person. And I guess that's not what I bring to the table necessarily, which is fine. And so having to overcome that was really frustrating.
Right.
Just because it was kind of one of those things. This is a terrible analogy, but if anyone's seen Legally Blonde, where
Yes.
she talks to her ex-boyfriend, she's like, "Am I on glue or did we both get into the same school?" And that is how I felt a lot of times. At Quantico, I was passing all the same tests, so why are you giving me a hard time?
Right.
We're all here.
Exactly.
And it was that was how I was feeling, and it was really frustrating.
Yes, and in your book you talk about the prototype black suit. I always
Mhm.
go back to the black
Yes,
suit.
yes.
And you are a fashion queen and just getting something a little bit out of the lines, blurring it, and didn't work out well for you.
No, it's not.
And I just love that when you were teaching high school to break down the gender barriers, for sure. I
Mhm.
mean, we have to. I mean, I know sometimes it's very difficult, obviously, but to break down those barriers.
Mhm.
So proud of you.
Thank you.
Good grief. Okay, girl, I have had you here in Fort Worth long enough. I'm going to get you back to talk about the housewives for sure.
Yes.
Maybe next year. That's going to be that'll be a good one. We have to have a glass of wine or two with that one. So tell us how to find you.
You can find me on Instagram at The Unexpected Spy, TikTok at The Unexpected Spy, or Twitter, Tracy Walder.
Y'all, and we're going to link her book, The Unexpected Spy. I've read it. I've listened to it. It's absolutely amazing, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, and I'm just so happy to call you my friend.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to call you my friend,
My
too.
blingy friend, everyone. So everyone, y'all, oh, gosh, this true crime. I'm not telling you to listen or not to listen, but, listen along on my podcast for sure, and everyone have a wonderful day. Be safe and keep being fabulous.